welcome back to the Solitary Practice Podcast. So today I want to talk about pressure. And this is probably going to be a little bit of a rough episode in that I cannot seem to come up with a refined and beautiful way to present this. So we're just going in for the raw cut. And hopefully that works for everybody. I find oftentimes when learning magic, you will learn something, but refinement of technique is something that comes from practice. And oftentimes when honing a skill and kind of making it your own, you're going to come up with your own little flair, so to speak. One of the things I came up with, and I'm not saying I'm the only one who does this. This is just kind of my take on this particular subject, being pressure. I find that how you handle pressure in your magical work can influence the success or lack thereof in your magical work. As with many things, I find that if you stop and look around the physical world, you can find answers to, well, lots of things, and sometimes things you didn't know you were looking for. And in this regard, many years ago, I was training a horse. And so we're going to take the little sidebar here. This horse was one of the ones that kind of like always threw its head in the air, didn't want anybody touching its head, and it was an absolute nightmare to get a halter or a bridle on this horse, because the minute you wanted to do something with its head, its solution was to stick its head way up above where you couldn't reach it. It was a very tall horse. And frequent complaint of the people who had this horse was that the horse's head was always in the air and they could never do anything when they had always had to yank it down. And that was at the time when I was starting to do some work with various entities and magical energies, and I was looking to refine it and see how I could make it more efficient, because we're always looking for more efficiency. And also, I was kind of toying with the whole, I want to say authority, but that's not really the term I want. I guess the pushback, the exertion of your will, and how much to exert and how that worked on things. So these two things kind of were happening at the same time. One of the things I learned when I was working with this horse to put its head down is that pressure really dictates the response that you get. So these people were, they would grab the halter or the lead rope or whatever they had on this horse, and they would pull its head down. And the horse's response was to pull its head up. And, it was a tug of war, basically. And you could get it on. I'm not saying this horse was particularly bad, but it was kind of a pain for the people who had the horse. They didn't like that. Well, the horse was just being a horse. I decided I was going to try to see if I could do something. Because if your people are unhappy with you, your life isn't going to be all that great if you're that horse. They're not necessarily going to be mean to it, but who wants somebody yanking on their head all the time? And so I put the halter and the lead rope on the horse, and I wanted the horse to put its head down and leave its head down. And it's just basically a matter of teaching it what you want it to do. It needs to know the expectations, and then there were two ways to do it. I could put my hand on the top of the horse's head and put a little pressure and have him drop his head, and then I wanted him to stay there. Or you could pull from, the clip on the bottom and have him drop his head. Now, the ticket to get this done easy is not to yank on it and try to muscle it. I think there's a correlation there with magic, because a lot of people try to muscle the energy, the entities, whatever they've got, and they're trying to wrestle them around to get them to do what you want them to do. There's a lot easier way to do it. One key takeaway that I'm just going to get it right out there in the front. I do not feel that pressure is necessarily the key to this whole episode. It is knowing when to release the pressure. If you take nothing away other than this, knowing when to release the pressure is the most valuable skill you can have. And so this is what I did with this horse. I started with the clip underneath because it's just easier. And I would hold it and gently place pressure, pull down. Not a lot of it, just some. And as soon as the horse, even a fraction of a centimeter, started to drop its head, I would let go. It took about 15 minutes from there, and I could put the horse's head down around my knees, and it would just hold it there, because you knew when to release it. If the horse had started to put its head down and I had just pulled harder, he would have pulled back, because that's just kind of how it goes. And magical energy and entities are not much different. If you are essentially trying to dominate them, push them, control them, just like the horse in this equation or anything else. People will do it. They're going to try to pull back and assert their own will. And that's what we're trying not to do here. Because again, we want the most efficient use of energy possible. Magic is very similar. With this particular horse, as soon as there was some indication that it was going my way, I took pressure away. Nothing likes pressure. People, horses, entities, magic, you, me. If you're feeling pressure, you want to get rid of that pressure. Everything seems guaranteed to want to move away from pressure. And I have no idea why that is. It just is. But why not use it to one's advantage? I find there are a couple different kinds of pressure. There is like the desperation and determination kind of pressure, where you're just trying to force something to happen. You're desperate, and desperate times, desperate measures. You're just trying to bully it through. There is the presence type of pressure, where you are just kind of pushing out your presence to create pressure. That can be a little bit of a gamble because it's a little bit of a, I want to say like a dominance thing. That's probably not the right word for it. Where you're pushing out yourself, so to speak, and using that to create pressure. That will work great as long as you're the most dominant thing in the room. If you're not, you're going to get clubbed. And then the last one, I call it authority. I don't know if it really is or not, but it's like the authority pressure. And what I mean by that is not the same kind of thing as presence. Authority and presence, in my mind, are two different things. If you are the authority on something and you are the end of the line, you are the complete top of the tower, that is it. You are the authority. Things can move into your orbit to release pressure. So it's more like a pressure void. So instead of like trying to repel things, I think a lot of times people think pressure means go away. And 9 times out of 10 it is. But also, a lack of pressure can pull things in. I think that the lack of pressure is very underutilized in magical work. Again, nature abhors a vacuum. Empty space will always want to be filled. And if things are feeling pressure and there's no pressure over by you, it's going to want to naturally move over there, more than likely, to escape the pressure that it's under. A lack of pressure or a lower amount of pressure is still pressure. It's just of a different weight. So many times when you go to assert magical pressure, you are trying to get something to do something. It's usually magical energy. It can also be magical entities. Quite frankly, I have seen it used on gods and goddesses. It requires a little more finesse, but I've seen it done. You are just using that pressure to convince things to move without you having to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it. And I, again, want efficiency. I want smoothness. I want everything kind of quiet and to go along easy. Basically, just being a bull in the china shop is not going to be easy or efficient. So subtle, long term. I should point that out. If you're looking for a quick fix, this is not it. Pressure, the way I use it in magic, takes some time to build. But when I was starting to work, way back when I did this whole thing with the horse, like I was talking about, it occurred to me that knowing when to release helped me need a lot less pressure to achieve what I was going for. So again, it was a light pull, and as soon as it started to go where I wanted to, I just let go. Pressure was released. It was rewarded for doing what I wanted it to do. And then a little more pressure, and then a quick release. And within 15 minutes, this horse is putting its head down and keeping it down because there's no reason to want to pull back because nobody is yanking it here and there and everywhere. And I find magical energy and entities are very, very similar in that regard. There are probably millions of workers out there doing some form of magic, and all of them are tugging entities and energies in every different direction, being its calm point, can sometimes make it more agreeable to working with you. And that counts for energies too. I know there are some people who probably don't consider energies as having like a consciousness. And yeah, I can kind of see that. But much like plants, if you've ever seen the studies on plants where somebody sneaks in and mutilates a couple of the plants and then the other plants can recognize the person who mutilated them, energy is kind of like the same thing. It may not be as smart as like dogs and cats, but it certainly can recognize things that take advantage of it, things that basically bully it and push it around, demanding things. And again, efficiency. I want these things to work with me, and I plan on working with them for a very long time, so I'm not looking to burn any bridges. And so I will, when I work, kind of explain what I'm looking for. And again, you need to know exactly what you're looking for. When I say kind of explain, it's not like we're having a long conversation. It's snips of concepts and I guess maybe visualizations, or basically I am energetically showing it. This is what I want right here. So you have to know it, and you have to know it all the way through. And I'm conveying that to whatever I'm working with, entities, energies, whatever. I'm telling it, I want this done. And with that is, the pressure of wanting it done. And I'm not hitting it with all I've got kind of thing. This is not an everything in the kitchen sink. This is a very light but firm pressure. And you've got to be prepared to hold that for a while, because not everything is going to want to run out and do what I want it to do right away. I will put a little pressure on it and then just wait. Eventually, it's not going to want that pressure because it's got other things to do. And it's going to kind of consider maybe just be easier to just go do it, and then I'll go away and stop bothering it. And then you'll get that little, I'm going to call it a sensation, where it starts to kind of lean into doing what you want it to do. Like it'll give, before it actually moves to do it, it has to redirect itself. Say we're working with energy. The energy is kind of like doing one thing and you want it to go do something else. Before it doesn't just like move. It kind of gets itself ready to redirect. There's like a little transition in there. And once that transition starts to happen, I tend to release the pressure. A lot of times it will just go do what you needed to do. Depends on the subtlety of the energy you're working with. Some of it is a little bit more sensitive than others of it. So sometimes you can just release that pressure and it's going to run right off and do what you want to do. The trickier stuff is going to say, well, pressure's gone, I don't have to move. In which case, bring the pressure back. And a lot of times I will click it up just a little bit, and then we'll go through it again. And each time it starts to move and I release the pressure and then it doesn't move, when I bring it back with a little bit more pressure. And the moment it moves, again, pressure is gone. I get what I want in the end, and it is not a lot of effort per se on my part. It is more of an intention. I have to pay a lot of attention to it, and I have to be ready to release at any moment. However, when some of these energies are, and I'm going to go with the more common ones. So like with more common energies, people like to work with like the basics, a lot of earth energies, occasionally water, although I find people really like earth more than some of the other ones. Fire seems popular, but fire is a little chaotic sometimes. I'd say earth energies. If there's a lot of people tugging on them and then they find you to be kind of steady, dependable, clear in what you're looking for, they're going to over time become much more agreeable to doing what you want them to do the first time. And so again, I use that for energies, I use it for entities, and occasionally I will use it for deities. Deities there, you can add, I guess we're going to call it a little extra oomph in there, because some of them are a little bit easier to manipulate than others, and you can kind of incentivize them if you really want to. I guess I'm gonna drop the pressure discussion there. I don't know if that made a lot of sense to anybody. I find that I use pressure a lot, but then I work frequently with like energy. So this time of year, it's spring and things are, we got a lot of like energy surges and things are up and things are down, and it needs to be smoothed out and kind of redirected. So I will frequently just use pressure to bumper car it in the right direction. And as soon as it's going in the right direction, again, release. There's no sense in holding it for a long time. I don't want to exert so much pressure that I antagonize it, that it feels threatened. And these are very general terms. It's not like you can threaten a particular energy, but if it feels kind of endangered, or like you are trying to get too heavy-handed with it, sometimes it'll snap back at you. So you don't want to go too far. But I do like the light long-term relationship building, and again, it's a refined kind of thing. It's not necessary to do it when practicing all the time. It's just something I like to work at here with the local energies and the local entities. I find you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. Occasionally you need a fly swatter. You got to look at your situation and decide what you need to do. If I circle back to anything, I think maybe the removal of pressure. I don't think I really kind of touched on that a whole lot. A lot of, well, I guess it's more for people, but even some entities, less so with energies. There's a lot of pressure on them in their normal run-of-the-mill existences. So lots of things are wanting things, or needing things, or demanding things, and there's lots of stuff they have to do, and it can be quite a bit of pressure. And again, people, plants, entities, animals, energies, even to some extent deities, they are going to try to move away from pressure. So if I were looking to gain some favor, perhaps, or maybe I actually just really liked something, if I wanted to assist because I saw they were under a number of pressures, I could create a space in which being in my general vicinity relieves that pressure. So essentially, day-to-day life is incredibly rough, and it's all too much, and it is easier to come be in my presence and know that I can take care of those things for them. And if you're catching on to the fact that there are people who are running through my house all the time, and there are people out and about who will show up here randomly, that's a good example of authority and the lack of pressure, because when they come here, I'll take care of it. They don't have to take care of it. It relieves that pressure. And one thing I will say is you're going to want to use that judiciously, because once you start removing the pressure, that can be very addicting for other ones. Don't overcommit. Be very, very careful about how you use it. Also, try to be a little selective if you're going to try it. You do not want literally everybody. There are people who I truly dislike, and if they showed up here, I would not grant that relief from pressure for them. I'm under no obligation to do so. It's purely my choice, and so I would probably not for them, not without some really good reasons. Anyway, it is maple season, and we are boiling sap into syrup. Pretty much everybody does it around here. There are a wide variety of ways to do it, and most of the local people have cauldrons over open fire. It is the way to do it. I kind of wish I could show you guys pictures of back in the 80s, in which we had this massive, truly massive cauldron. Two people could not pick it up alone. And we actually would cut down a tree, and then we would cut off probably a 10-foot section, set that in the ground with a pin out the top, and then take the remaining tree and drill a hole through at the appropriate spot and put the tree down on the peg. So we're using an entire tree to lift this cauldron, and we would put the heavier end down, notch it, and put the chain for the cauldron on that. From there, everybody else would get out on the long end of the tree, basically using the lever action to lift the cauldron up and swing it over the fire. And that is how we boiled maple syrup before we had evaporators and everything. It was like that a long time when I think about it. There is a rock, it's in the woods now, but back in the day it was in more of a field section. And it is this big, sharp, triangular rock that goes up, and there are still scorch marks up the rock because that was used to boil the syrup back in the day. We don't use it anymore. We've had a couple of successive boiling places as, things modernize and move through. We did eventually get a evaporator. Our idea of it being a modern thing is laughable at this point because it's modern to us. it is archaic by modern maple standards. The modern maple industry is very into like reverse osmosis, gas-fired evaporators, and that kind of stuff. But far and away, we enjoy boiling over an open fire as much as possible. So it is very normal this time of year. And it's the new year for us. We've basically got a cauldron over a fire, and it's bubbling away, and we stay with it 24 hours a day until we've made enough syrup for ourselves for the year. It sounds like it wouldn't be much, a gallon, sometimes 2 gallons, depending on how the year is going, but it takes so long to boil it down into that gallon. And because of the sugar content, you have to be careful. It will rise up and boil over the top of the pot, and then the sugar catches fire. It can get exciting really, really quick if you're not paying attention. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. Earlier this morning, I had to treat somebody who had a coal in the eye. I personally think it looked more like a piece of hot ash got in their eye, but they thought it was a coal. Could be, the logs snap and pop, and so, it could have been a coal, but it really did look like a piece of hot ash when I got it out. I will be treating medical issues as we go through this because it's not a project apparently until somebody bleeds. I was sitting out there this morning on my turn to watch the cauldron boil, and I was thinking that essentially, that sap that comes out of the tree is basically the blood of the tree, and we're basically boiling this blood down into a sweet, sticky syrup. That is kind of how we start the new year here. So when the sap starts to run in the trees, that's when our new year starts, because that is the first sign of, well, basically life. After the hard winter, everything is dead, it's cold, it's dark, and then slowly you'll get these pulses of life. So when the sap comes up in the tree the first time, it's usually a short run, and it's like a brief pulse. It's the sweetest, usually, of all of the ones. I don't know, I think there's probably a metaphor in there. It's the first sign of life after the cold winter. It is the sweetest that you will get. And then from there, it slowly picks up speed as the season starts to transition. And so you're getting more and longer pulses until there's pretty much no sugar content left in there. It's not worth it to boil it down. Everybody pulls the taps, the trees bud out, leaves come, spring's deployed. And that is how we bring in the new year, by staying up around the clock, boiling tree blood into syrup, which we will then use to nourish ourselves throughout the rest of the year. And it's not just syrup. We make the candies and all that stuff. Maple cream, highly recommend. If anybody hasn't had that, you should definitely try that. It is quite lovely. I think I'll stop here for today. If you enjoyed the episode, as always, please share it with others. It was a bit of a ramble, but if you have any questions or a topic you want to hear more about, you can contact me through the website, thesolitarypractice.com. Again, email, voicemail, whatever works for you. I, as always, appreciate your time, and I will see you next week.